My grandmother used to say she almost married someone else because of a chair. Not metaphorically, literally. At a wedding, somebody's little boy dragged a wooden chair across the courtyard and blocked her path while she was carrying tea glasses. One slipped. It shattered. Everybody turned around at once because silence was a serious thing back then, especially at weddings. And that was the first time my grandfather saw her. Not in some cinematic way, either. He later admitted he mostly remembered how embarrassed she looked, trying to clean the tea with her scarf while pretending she wasn't shaking. My grandmother hated when he told that story. "She makes it sound cute now," he told me once, years later. "At the time, she looked at me like I personally broke the glass." The wedding happened in the late 70s, in a small town where everybody knew not only your business, but your uncle's business too. There was no internet, obviously, no texting, no disappearing into private conversations. People lived close to each other in ways that sound exhausting now. If somebody liked you, their mother usually knew before you did. My grandmother had gone there with her older cousin. She almost didn't attend because she didn't have a proper dress for it. She told me this once while folding laundry, like it wasn't important. "I spent 3 days worrying about sleeves," she said. "Meanwhile, your grandfather was apparently deciding his future." That was how she talked. She'd say things that should have sounded romantic while handing you socks. My grandfather came from a conservative Muslim family. Not cruel people, just structured people. The kind where decisions moved through the family before they became real. His father owned a small repair shop. His mother cared deeply about reputation in that exhausted way women sometimes do when reputation is the only thing they were ever taught to protect. And my grandmother wasn't exactly what they wanted. Not because she was wild, she wasn't. But her family was louder, less traditional. Her brothers argued openly. Her father had a habit of saying whatever came into his head at dinner. One aunt had divorced her husband and remarried, which apparently lived in local memory longer than actual crimes. People talked. My grandfather still pursued her anyway, although pursued looked very different then. At first, it was mostly timing. He somehow kept appearing wherever her relatives gathered, helping move tables, carrying crates, standing too close during tea service without speaking directly to her. Once he spent almost an entire evening talking to her uncle just to stay in the same yard. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But women back then had to pretend not to notice certain things, or life became difficult very quickly. Especially if neighbors noticed first. The first actual conversation they had lasted maybe 4 minutes, outside a bakery. Winter. My grandmother said she only remembered 2 things clearly. His hands were shaking slightly, and he kept looking over her shoulder while talking, terrified somebody would recognize them standing there alone. "Do you need something?" she finally asked him. He said, "No." Then, after a pause, "I think I do, actually." That was apparently enough to ruin both their lives for the next 2 years. For a while, everything existed in fragments. Short conversations after family gatherings, accidental walks in the same direction. Messages passed through cousins who enjoyed the drama more than they admitted. Nothing physical. Nothing modern. But emotionally, everybody could feel something building, including the families, especially the mothers. My grandmother once told me women always know first. Men just announce things later and act like they discovered them. At some point, his mother started watching her differently at gatherings. Not rude exactly. Worse. careful. You can survive anger easier than carefulness. There was one dinner where my grandmother reached for bread at the same moment my grandfather did, and his mother noticed. Nobody said anything. That was the horrible part. The entire table shifted emotionally without a word. My grandmother stopped eating after that. She said she suddenly became aware of how loud her bracelets sounded against the plate. That detail stayed with me for some reason. Not the romance, the bracelets. Anyway, things became tense slowly, which is usually how real problems happen. His older brother pulled him aside one night after prayers and basically told him to stop embarrassing the family before people started talking seriously. My grandfather asked, "Talking about what?" His brother said, "You know exactly what." That sentence followed them for months because nobody ever explained anything directly. Everybody just implied disaster constantly. Then came the first real misunderstanding. And honestly, this part made me angry when I first heard it. My grandmother heard through somebody, maybe a cousin, maybe a neighbor. Stories changed every time. That my grandfather had agreed to meet another girl for a formal introduction. A proper girl, people said. Quieter family, more religious, better reputation. My grandmother acted like she didn't care. That was her specialty. She spent an entire week telling people she was relieved because the situation had become embarrassing anyway. Meanwhile, she apparently cried so hard one night, her younger sister slept beside her because she was scared something bad would happen. Nobody told my grandfather any of this. So he kept trying to speak to her while she slowly turned into ice around him. At a wedding, another wedding, there were always weddings, he finally cornered her near the outdoor sinks behind the venue. Did I do something? No. You won't even look at me. There's nothing to look at. He told me once that conversation scared him more than his father ever did, because she sounded calm. Apparently, calm women were dangerous in his experience. Finally, he asked her directly whether she believed the rumors. And instead of answering, she said, "Your mother already chose. Why should I make this harder for her?" That was the first time he realized how far things had spread socially without him understanding. The truth was uglier and smaller at the same time. His mother had arranged a meeting with another family. He had gone, but mostly because refusing outright would have created a different explosion inside the house. He told my grandmother he spent the entire evening talking to the girl's father about motorcycle engines because he was too nervous to look at anyone else. "Did you like her?" my grandmother asked. And this is why I believe this story, honestly. Because his answer wasn't cinematic. He said, "She seemed kind." That upset my grandmother more than if he'd denied everything. For a while, they almost ended there. Not dramatically, quietly, which is how most relationships actually die. My grandmother stopped attending gatherings where his family might appear. My grandfather started staying later at the repair shop because home became exhausting. His mother interpreted his silence as obedience at first. Then, one evening, she found letters. Not love letters exactly. That would have been easier. Small, folded notes. Practical things. "Your aunt asked about the medicine. Don't come Friday. My cousin saw us speaking." Tiny, terrified little documents. My grandfather said his mother sat at the kitchen table, holding them for nearly an hour before speaking. When she finally did, she didn't yell. That almost made it worse. She just asked, "Do you understand what people will say about her if this fails?" Not him. Her. That mattered to my grandfather. I think it changed something, because up until then, he'd mostly been afraid of disappointing his family. That was the first moment he understood my grandmother had more to lose socially than he did. After that, things became harder but somehow more honest. His father stayed distant for months. His mother barely spoke during dinners. Relatives started giving advice nobody requested. One woman actually told my grandmother, "Love becomes normal very quickly. Family problems don't." Can you imagine saying that to a 20-year-old girl? And still, people softened eventually. Not magically. Slowly. Reluctantly. My great-grandmother helped more than anyone expected. Quiet woman. Observed everything. One afternoon, she told my grandfather's mother, "If they're already suffering this much before marriage, maybe we should stop helping them suffer." That line apparently ended half the war. Not immediately, but enough. The families began speaking properly after that. Conditions appeared, discussions, meetings, pride management, endless tea. By the time they married, everybody acted exhausted instead of victorious. Honestly, that's probably why the marriage lasted. No fantasies survived the process, just commitment. I asked my grandmother once if it had all felt worth it. She didn't answer right away. She was cutting fruit in the kitchen, taking forever with one peach, like she was negotiating with it. Then she shrugged. "Your grandfather became easier to love after I saw him scared," she said. "Before that, he was just handsome." That was probably the most romantic thing she ever admitted. They were married 43 years, and even near the end, he still watched rooms for her first. Not in an obsessive way, in a habit way. Like part of him was still making sure she got home safely from weddings.